Okay, we call this meeting to order, special meeting of the Kent Board of Selectmen on Friday, October 4th at 1 p.m. for the purposes of discussing and taking possible action on the streetscape proposal brought to us by the committee last Tuesday. We are live on the air as usual, and I thought a good place to start would be just to sort of review what we were presented the other day and make sure we all understand the same. Yes?
Technically, you never accepted their recommendation, so you should start with that and then pick it apart if that's your,
Simply accepting it, yeah, okay.
to acknowledge that they did it.
Yeah, so we'll start the meeting. I'll just make a motion to accept the proposal from the Streetscape Committee 2 as presented by John Johnson on Tuesday, October 1st.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Just
Yes,
accept it.
I don't think we're accepting it. I don't think that's right. We're receiving it for discussion and evaluation.
That's what I meant by accept, but okay.
Well, accept sounds to me like, yes, we
Not
accept it.
endorsing it, no.
So, I agree with going through it to make sure we're all on the same page.
Right.
And I think there's two objectives today. One is to define the next step, as in setting up a town meeting for the town to review it.
Mm-hmm.
And two, for us to define exactly how that's worded for the town to
Agree. So I will modify my motion to say that, just to make a motion that we acknowledge receiving the proposal from Streetscape Committee 2.
second your revision.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. So we're in receipt, and I'd like to go through it, because I found it a bit confusing myself the other day. I'm not sure I fully understand. Hopefully we can come to a meeting in mind. So just a couple of pieces of information that were needed the other night. I did confirm that there is a 20% town match. Barbara confirmed that, and I confirmed it with Rick Lynn, who spoke with the DOT. And I asked Rick to please check with the DOT as to when a decision might be made on this TAP funding. And unlike what I was told initially, DOT says probably spring of 2020. So not fast. It was due at the end of September, but I was told that it was due because a decision would be made fairly quickly. But
I guess that is quick. And
that might be quick in DOT world, yes. Yes.
okay, that's significant.
Yep. So we were presented with we were presented a document entitled Recommendations of the Streetscape Committee 2. And, so my understanding is that this will be a two-phase, the proposal anyway, is for a two-phase project. Yet there is mention in here of phase 3.
Well, as I understood it, it was broken up into phases because of the prospect of the additional funding coming in. That was separate because of its required to be new construction.
Exactly, and separate because it involves dealing with the federal government. And that was Rick Lynn's recommendation, that we keep it separate for that reason. So,
Okay,
yes.
but it was not a phase in terms of chronological construction.
That was not John's recommendation, that's correct.
His recommendation was that all be done, and as
Right.
Chris said, you're not gonna dig up the whole town, but done as an entire project.
Right.
I'm not sure where that leaves us with the TAP funding.
Well, I'm not sure, if we want to move forward, and I do think we need to move forward, to show some action, I think we're going to have to move forward with actual bidding and ultimately construction with just a phase 1.
If we want to preserve TAP as an option.
Right.
just accept that the TAP funding doesn't fit with our schedule here, then we go ahead with some manifestation of the whole project. If we're gonna accept TAP funding, I think we have to eliminate phase 2, proceed as a town with phase 1,
Eliminate phase 2 from the town meeting.
from the next step.
Right, I agree.
And that would preserve the possibility of getting TAP funding. I mean, who knows how much of a shot in the dark is.
I think we'll get something, I have no idea how much, but we can't, that's the best I can tell.
But that's not their recommendation, correct? Their recommendation is to do phase 1 and phase 2.
That's their recommendation.
That is their recommendation.
So it's really not changed from the initial proposal that was given by the first group, is that accurate?
Well, there were no phases, I don't think, given by the first committee.
All right, you can take out the word phase, because to me,
All right, so
there's no
combine
phase,
into one.
it is
Okay.
one project.
Okay.
The only way, and I think where we all got sort of off track, is this whole allure of another pot of money coming our way. And that's great if it can come our way. But the project, as I read it, is one whole project. They want to, they're not even saying, they don't care how it gets funded. They're just asking the scope of this is the project, correct?
That's my understanding.
The nuances that I see that are different from the first go-round is there is an opportunity for, on some of the material to be determined later on. Who determines that, how that's determined, when it's determined, and where that fight occurs, if it's going to be a fight. I don't mean to classify it as a fight, but where that discussion happens, I don't know, and I think we should be
Well, what
mindful of that.
materials other than the asphalt versus concrete sidewalk?
Well, the cobblestones, I mean, the question comes into play is, there's a clear savings, if you will, of a difference of material. There's a clear savings if you put cobblestone versus not cobblestone. I looked through it, it's not a lot, but there's some savings. And so, really, you know, the question comes down to that aesthetic component of what the town could save, as to who determines that and how that's determined. And I don't know if we're gonna be the ones to answer that, but
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Do you, I'll ask you, Chris, since you brought it up. So what do you propose or think should be brought to the townspeople? A proposal from us, based upon the proposal that was brought to us by the Streetscape Committee too. It might be a little bit different, it might be the same. Or are we gonna have round 3 of, like the two previous hearings, where we're gonna be arguing over materials?
I think that would be pointless.
I think so too, because I don't think it's gonna get us any farther than the first 2 did.
Right.
When this whole project started with the Streetscape Committee 1, if you recall, and I'm sure you remember part of it, I requested many times some alternatives involving lower cost options. And as I look at this proposal, other than the little nuances, you know, maybe some changes of cobblestone, there's 2 things that were undertaken to reduce cost. One was eliminate lighting,
Right.
and 2 is the option for asphalt sidewalk. If you look at the option for concrete sidewalk, it seems to me it's Streetscape 1 plan, sans lighting. And if there's a little difference there may be, but to me, you know, really there's not been a great effort to economize. So it's my feeling that we should recommend, come up with one recommendation, and that's for asphalt I particularly enjoy's not the right word, I tuned into Mike Gobble's discussion about asphalt sidewalks versus concrete, and I found it compelling, maybe that's a better word. So I would suggest we go ahead with one proposal for asphalt sidewalks, and we can provide background information. I think I would say it's significantly enough less expensive, if I'm reading this correctly, than the cement sidewalks. We're talking about all in $3.2 million for concrete sidewalks, and all in $2.6 million for asphalt sidewalks. And if you look at it on a yearly basis, that was an interesting analysis. I never would have thought to do it that way, but to me, that's something people can relate to. A significant, it's almost double, not double, but a substantial increased cost per year to have the concrete sidewalks. Now, if there's some comment comes out really strongly supporting cement sidewalks and people want it, well, my opinion is asphalt's a better option for the town. But I do think we should go in with one option and explanations. And if the townspeople reject it, and they reject it and give us rational reasons, like they'd rather spend more money and put the concrete sidewalks in, okay, well, they've spoken, and that's what we'll have to do.
The only thing I agree with that you said is what you ended with is going in with one option. I do not have no appetite personally for going in with multiple options because it will become exactly what we went through earlier. I would not support, I respect Mike Gobble's opinion on anything construction related, but in this case I differ from him.
Well, I think just for the record, and if you were at the meetings, I had not attended, but it wasn't just Mike that felt that. Jack Nelson, who's also
Yes.
a contractor and
Right.
deals with materials like that, also indicated that this seemed to be the better option.
That's correct.
So, this is how I simply see it playing. You have two concrete and tar guys who are talking to an architect and a planner. And you've got an aesthetic component and you've got a material component. I'm not gonna say who's right or wrong, because
I'm not either.
it's not really, and which is why I didn't wanna be on the group. Because my opinion would have been more like pavement, because my is, I don't care about the aesthetics so much, because I don't think that the aesthetics are really the component down on downtown. I'm concerned about usage and really using things, as I mentioned before, which I believe personally, and it's been confirmed, that at least from the train station north to my house, the pavement is actually in good shape. I also don't see a lot of parking up there, so why are we spending for granite? I understand the argument that John Johnson presented, which is his opinion, which is the continuity of town.
What section were you talking about again?
From right here, from the train station, where's North Main Street? There we are.
From the train station?
From the train tracks, in effect, north.
Okay.
Those sidewalks are in decent shape, and it would probably last us another 10, 15
Well,
years.
I think that, I agree to some degree with what you just said. Their proposal is to, for that very reason, the condition of those sidewalks is to stop the proposed concrete at the north entrance, or it's actually the exit from the Kent Green. So it's from there
Well,
all the way up.
I understand that,
Left as is.
but my point is, just from a life, in a usage point of view, from the railroad tracks to there, I know what they're talking about. The reason they're talking about that is they want continuity and they want to drive traffic north. I get it, and I don't disagree with it. But when it comes to money and expenditures versus use of a life use of something, I have a problem with it. And that's my it's been my problem all the way through. Because, and I lean more towards pavement, because I agree with the continuity. But if the continuity in this town is already pavement, why not piggyback off of that versus change to another material and then have to change all the time? You see the logic there? And I see and again, this is just my personal opinion, but it's been backed up by people who actually know materials. North of the train station seems to be fine. Portions of going down to Elizabeth Street seem fine. And so what I was seeking, I know Jeff was seeking some alternatives. My idea was to seek, I was seeking alternatives that would say, this is how we're gonna blend our sidewalks into, and that's why I specifically asked for, can we get a real needs analysis as to what's, in a triage, what's bad, what's okay and serviceable, and what's really good and we can keep in use.
Well, I think they took that into consideration. They don't have statistics on it, but I walked the sidewalks with them, the walking meeting they held, and they got to most of the sidewalks in town. Not every square inch, but most of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they were, as a result of that, are more familiar as a group with the existing conditions than they were prior to that.
Well, yes, but the simple perspective is that there are some that are in good shape, some that are in horrible shape, and some that are in serviceable shape for another 10 years. Yeah, not every piece of sidewalk in town needs to be replaced right now. If, for instance, if as an example, we were, from a DOT point of view, or from a town crew point of view, we're going to fix these, we'd go and we'd fix a section, right? Just like we fix a road, and then we would fix another section, and another section. I don't see that here, and what I see driving that here is more an aesthetic component than an actual needs. And while I understand the aesthetics, don't get me wrong, I sell aesthetics all day long. That's not my point. My point is, now we have to change a lot of this material, a lot of these sidewalks that I think are at least in serviceable condition. So,
Which is,
Mhm.
just to clarify, in your little
yeah,
list there, you said horrible, serviceable, and good. Which is higher, good, or which is better, good or serviceable?
well, serviceable is the best, because
Serviceable, okay,
it gets more time.
Serviceable, good is not quite as good, but.
Yeah, and then stuff that needs immediate fixing.
All right, I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure I understood your terminology.
So I'm a little frustrated that didn't come out. I understand why it hasn't come out. I believe they actually went and did an analysis. Their analysis is that if we're going, even though there might be serviceable sidewalks, we still should replace them now so there's the continuity.
I think that was certainly one of their,
That's the way I interpret it. So, you actually raise another prospect here that if some of the asphalt sections are not necessarily in need of replacement, the actual cost when we're finished might be a bit lower if they determine, 300 feet here will not need to be replaced and still lend continuity to the town. That's work that's reduced now, the scope of work could get reduced.
not sure if
If some of the areas that Chris thinks do not need to be replaced,
right.
then the scope of work in actuality, regardless of bidding on the whole project, when they get there, if this particular section does not need to be replaced, then the scope of work may end up being reduced in
Which,
practicality.
as one example, they have included in here, and that is not to extend the sidewalks beyond the Kent Green driveways. That's serviceable sidewalk.
Yeah, but again,
That's just one
the
section.
only reason they're doing that, the only reason both committees have ever recommended that, in my opinion, is because it's not part of town. It's not part of the commercial town. Technically, it's not part of what people think of walking.
Well,
I
yeah.
get where the people north of town want people to walk. I get it.
But you would know this better than anybody in this room doing what you do for a living, wouldn't you? And living in town. Haven't you seen, I have, people walking,
Mhm.
not locals, but people walking north on a sidewalk, getting to the railroad tracks, stopping,
Yep.
sort of looking, and turning around and walking the other way.
Mhm.
And
So the question is, are they stopping because there's not a continuity of sidewalk? Or are they stopping because psychologically there's not a tight, condensed village to draw you down, which is actually,
It's probably some of both.
I'll tell you,
I just think the sidewalk piece that you just mentioned is part of it. I think if there were continuity of sidewalk beyond the railroad tracks, I'm not saying everybody would suddenly say, oh, great,
No, right,
more
yeah.
sidewalk, let's keep going, but I think more would than presently do.
okay, I'll accept that argument.
And-
Should the taxpayer, for that small amount of, I may be going that way, pay for that? And if so, then why not push them to the condominiums and to my house? I mean, what's the logic of not doing it?
Well, I don't see.
I mean, why did they cut out my section? How about that? If you want continuity of a town, why did they cut out from, because they did it because it's, one, there are only a few people from the condos, myself and maybe a few people going up to church, or the Gilmore girls walking it, right? And it doesn't service really much up there in terms of commercial. Again, I'm not arguing against trying to do this. What I'm simply saying is, can't we phase it? And phase is maybe the wrong. Can't we do it in sections such that, the biggest fear I get from these committees is that they fear if they do we only do a section of area of what they're proposing, it'll never get done again. I am not of that belief. I don't know if you are, but I'm not of that belief.
I don't know about this present committee, but that fear was voiced a number of times by the first committee.
And John Johnson says it himself on the second committee, and John was part of the first committee. I don't subscribe to that. I think the town should be really focused on getting that continuity at some point, but do we have to do it all now?
Well, I don't think we need to do all of it. I think there are, as they have done and as we might do more of, I think there are sections that could be held till later, and that's gonna happen because of the news that this TAP funding, even if it is available, isn't gonna be available till the spring, so that's gonna certainly eliminate.
Well, no, I think you got off track on that. That's a different question. We're talking about this project and whether the stuff Chris is talking about might be future projects. This project is one project unless we choose to take the gamble that TAP funding will come in sufficiently to fund what's identified as phase two.
I wouldn't be in favor of doing that, taking a gamble.
So in that case, I think we need to forget about TAP funding as a driver for
No,
this.
I just brought it up as an example. I'm not.
So this whole project is, pretty much well-defined. There's some issues that could probably be detailed some more, but, I don't see any reason why we can't recommend what's here going forward with the asphalt sidewalks. What are our options here today besides going back and redoing it and having a streetscape 3 to come in and refine some little details?
Well, our other option is to recommend what they're recommending.
Oh, well, which is that?
Which
Well,
is
they recommend
concrete
two
and
things.
granite.
No, they're recommending A or B. They're not
You're
recommending.
recommending soliciting bids and
Bids on
bids.
A and B.
I'm sorry?
They're recommending soliciting bids on A and B. It's your job to get to a town meeting and just get the money, the total project appropriated, then see what the bids come in, whether. And the first, may I speak?
Go ahead.
The first committee included all the way up to the community house.
Mhm.
The second one, because of the contractors on it, they gotta discuss some money more than the materials and stuff like that. So they were looking for different places to cut back on them, because they didn't think the engineer's numbers were good.
Mhm.
So there, one of our things was to just do Main Street and concrete, and do everything else in asphalt.
Right.
And then, what do you pick for the town center? If you pick the monument, then you wanna start with concrete all four ways from there, and then break off asphalt at some point. So the only reason, as far as I could tell from it, that this section up north of the tracks was reduced was because it was only done a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
So if there was any place to reduce the number to replace anything, it would have been there. As far as I'm concerned, reducing it by that little strip is not, if you're gonna make everything,
Right.
do the project, you might as well do that piece too. and that's gonna be the only piece without granite, and if it ends up being concrete, that'll only be the only piece without concrete. So, for a little piece like that, then when you do Elizabeth and Meadow Street and all those, when they finally come around to get replaced, and you have the option, again, concrete or stick with asphalt then, but most of the stuff in town, even though it's walkable, there's very little curbing left on any of it.
Mhm.
So you have vehicles up on it all the time, the plows keep hitting the edges, because the overlays that are put on without curbing in front of them. Anything that comes along the edge catches the edge of the overlay and starts breaking it off. So if you don't replace the curbings at least, then you're still gonna have the same continuous problems with maintenance.
And would, in your opinion, Rick, the heaviest use is downtown. Can you get away with not doing granite, like north of the entrance to the common, to this area?
The only thing you're risking then is the snow plows just cut it up. I mean, if you look out here, this asphalt curving, it's been in 2 years, and look at all the marks in it and stuff already, so.
Right, but I guess my point I've been through Salisbury where they have that beautiful curving going out, and then it phases off into asphalt curving when no one parks.
Yeah.
No one parks there, so it's just the plows that are hitting it maybe every once in a while. And I guess it's clear to me that the granite makes the most sense if there was a consensus there. Because that's really the only material change here is concrete versus asphalt. They're not saying, let's do asphalt curbing or let's do concrete curbing, because they realize that this is the best. Again, not really concerned about continuity as much. I don't know if we can get away with, other sections of town, but you would know better.
And there was a number of meetings where residents came in, people in town, and asked why if this section was getting concrete, why isn't the third section gonna get concrete?
Mhm.
Are we,
Mhm.
lesser value there or what, or? So
I
that's-
pay
I think
taxes
that's-
too, that,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think that, basically, I think that's why it ended up being all concrete at the end. Because there was a number of, all the way through, it was back and forth on whether to have asphalt or concrete.
David, a comment?
If I can make a comment, when you look at all of the time the first group spent and the time that the second group spent and the town meetings that we've had, I think if you go for less than the whole project and a lower amount of money to raise, I agree that it'd be very difficult to get everybody on board to do a second phase. So I would urge you to do it, whatever you're gonna do, to do it all at once, whether it's concrete, whether it's asphalt, but do it all. And try to get everybody on board to do it once.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to just react to that. If we did, as an example, a portion of this, and this board or the next board of the town were committed to doing more of the sidewalks, this board would not even have to go to the town for approval. This board could put it in the capital plan, that's aside from, the general budget. This could put it more in the budget of, in the town crew budget. This board could put it more into capital planning. This board could create another.
If we had town approval for the whole thing.
No, all I'm saying is if we just scrapped everything, all right? If we just scrapped everything, and we were gonna be here, the three of us, for the next 10 years, we could map out exactly this plan and do it. We would just have to go to the town and say, we've saved $300,000 and we're not gonna, and then we got a steep grant for this and we're gonna do this section of the road. And then we're gonna focus on this section of the road. That is achievable. So I do not buy the argument that I do not buy into the fear that David just expressed, that the town won't have the stomach or nobody will want to do this. I disagree with that. I think that this town has looked after itself quite well.
Even the selectmen don't have the stomach, Chris.
That's not true, David Bain. It is not true. We are willing to do stuff. I don't think, Jeff just mentioned he's willing to do it. It's not that we're not willing to do this.
Not very quickly. It's been years. And you guys just sit and talk and talk and talk.
I agree, it could be done that way, but there is a, Board of Finance is stuck with this, what they wanna see the capital plan at. And until they're willing to go beyond that number and actually fund more projects without spreading them out, so over 20 years or whatever, I don't think it,
Well,
it's not like it's a $200,000, you do a $200,000 piece, you're not gonna get very much done.
I understand that, but what it does in the capital plan then, it says, okay, do we want sidewalks now, or do we want a fire truck? And then we have the fight there. That, to me, is a more appropriate discussion, is who goes in, a pool, your trucks, sidewalks, another road, you know, that is, to me, a viable discussion. My point simply is, I do not buy into this, and it's not like I do not buy into it. It offends me that if that's the only reason people are going ahead and voting for this, because it all gets done and we'll never do it again, I think that's just not giving the town enough credit.
I hope that's not the only reason.
Well, they've been hanging it over as if it's
But I
been a
think it is-
threat.
I think it is a reason.
I think it's, to me, it's not a reason to go ahead and just spend, put just that saving. And I also believe, and you've done a good job at this, over the 10 years, is you found money. So I'm, while what's coming out of Hartford is not promising, I'm bullish that at some time, we can find more money to help. I mean, in this short period of time that I've been on dealing with this, you found 3 different grants. Now, they may not all be real, but 2 of them are real. And now all of a sudden, we're talking about another grant. In this short period of time, talking about 3 grants. And I find that that's hopeful. So what are we bringing to the town?
Well, I think Jeff has made clear what he'd like to see, right?
Yeah, I'd like to see a single recommendation for the entire project with asphalt sidewalks. I mean, I think it's become consensus that the granite curbing is probably appropriate. I mean, I think there's other issues with granite curbing, but it'll certainly look nice, and I think everyone drifts in that direction. I think there are reasons, 2 reasons for the asphalt. One is that it's considerably less expensive, and we're always asking the town for money. I'd like to demonstrate that, you know, we don't just have to go out and buy what is the most expensive when there's a good option. And I personally think asphalt is just as good as concrete, if not better in some ways. To me, a repair of some asphalt damage will look a lot better than a repair of concrete. Now, I was down at Fairfield yesterday, and there was a concrete sidewalk that was obviously years old, 10, 20, I don't know how old. And there was nothing attractive about that sidewalk. The brand new ones, like going in Newtown, yeah, they look great when they're pouring them in. So I don't think concrete is the be-all and the end-all for the sidewalk. So I advocate just going in with one proposal to get approval for the funding of the whole project and get a bid on asphalt sidewalks.
Is that a motion? Or just for?
I'll make it a motion. I think the wording to send it to the town, we need to refine. That we go to the town for the town meeting to get approval for getting a bid for this proposal in scope, granite curbs, asphalt sidewalks.
Is there a second? Not from me.
I'll second it for discussion purposes. I agree with your logic with respect to saving, you know, on the savings component. I also tend to more be on the asphalt page, if you will, primarily, as I said, for the phasing in. However, I'm not getting that phasing in process. So I'm not wed to make, I'm not confident I can make that determination whether asphalt or concrete is really what is better. And there's an aesthetic component that, you know, there's going to be a portion of this town that's gonna be ripping that we put down pavement. And there's gonna be a portion of this town that's gonna be ripping that we put down concrete.
Sure, no question.
So, the three of us can decide that and deal with that as we will, or we can somehow figure out a way where do we take the lower of the two bids? Do we go and do it as they recommended and get two bids? And if the bids are too high for concrete,
No, they have to be. Concrete is more expensive. That's a given. There's no way a concrete bid's gonna come in lower than an asphalt.
I would be more in favor of putting out the whole project in concrete and granite with the understanding, this did come up at one of the last meetings, I think it was even Jack Nelson who brought it up, and I agree with him, with the understanding that there could be even built into the proposal and the bid package, that should the bid come in over budget, there would be certain areas that we would back up on and say, that's gonna be concrete, or asphalt, that's gonna be asphalt.
So much for continuity.
Well, yes, I'm a continuity guy to a point, but I am not, and I won't be here to push for anything when this happens, but I am not in any way, shape, or form in favor, and I know you're not either, of asking the people of the town of Kent for more money than they've already authorized. So if the bid comes in at $5 million, absolutely not. I'll be just Joe Citizen at that point. I'll vote against it if that were to happen. I don't think it will, but isn't that, Rick, maybe I didn't word it correctly, but isn't that somewhat the way Jack was talking towards at the end of one of the last couple of meetings about having some, I forget the terminology he used. There's a proper term for.
Then you're gonna go back to the same thing with the people. Again, where the people have those areas gotta be.
Yeah, that might be a battle that will have to be fought.
And if you're talking about allowing making calls on the field, then we could get into areas like what Chris said, well, now this section we don't have to do because it's in pretty good condition, but over there we'll do. I just think that really doesn't define a clear project for the vote, for the town vote, to have some provisos. I think if we go with the granite and asphalt, it seems well within our appropriated funds.
It seemed to be.
And I mean, you never know until the bids come in, but.
Well, using the numbers they provided, it appears as though concrete and granite would be well within our
Yeah,
appropriated funds.
that's true.
Not the entire committee agrees that these numbers are accurate, but using
And
these
by not
numbers.
being accurate, they're low.
That's
I
what
mean, I don't think
some-
anybody would suggest that they're gonna come in lower than those.
No, nobody ever suggested that.
so the inverse of that is, if they come in too high, do we put asphalt everywhere and then put a little bit of concrete places?
That's a total invert, yeah.
But see, the point comes down to, and I don't know why I'm monkeying around with this is about aesthetics. This is all about aesthetics. Although some people would argue there's a, you know, with the asphalt, there's a safety feature, because in one of the, it says, item number 3, recommend the engineers instruct and recommend ways to decrease icing and increase traction of the ADA ramps. The ADA ramps are concrete. So by implication, either they didn't do them properly, or concrete is slippery, more slippery than asphalt. I mean, that's.
And I don't know whether either of those.
And so, you know, when I use the inverse of what you proposed and what Jack Nelson had mentioned, the reaction is like, oh no, you have to put more asphalt and less concrete. And that's an aesthetic reaction, that's not a safety reaction.
Well, I'm speaking only for myself, and I would be in favor, I'm looking ahead to the future, probably
Yep.
next year. I would be in favor if this what was said earlier about some people, because I was at most of the meetings, and more merchants in particular coming in saying, well, how come you're proposing this for that end of town? I get lousy asphalt, that kind of thing. I get that, but I think after it came in way overpriced, I think people would say, I guess we sort of have no choice. Because I don't think anybody like myself has the appetite for asking for more money.
Right, but by that statement alone, because asphalt is less expensive, it's also deemed as less attractive. Because you're saying, well, you know, if we're gonna save, I might as well use the cheap stuff.
Well,
Because
it is the cheap stuff. But
it is the
that's
cheap
not-
stuff.
It is cheaper stuff.
So why not use it all in the beginning, to Jeff's point? If it's good, if it works, if it's aesthetically okay, why not use, why concrete?
You're asking me?
I'm asking you.
I don't like it. I don't like the way it looks.
You don't like asphalt the way it
I do
looks?
not.
So it's an aesthetic?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't like the way it looks now after being in place for a varied amount of time all throughout town. I've made a conscious effort to look at both asphalt sidewalks, they're hard to find, but I've looked at some, and concrete sidewalks in Connecticut, in Oregon, in any place where I can see them. And, this sidewalk right out here, I was told, actually, one person said the building built in 1989, the sidewalks were put in before the building went in. I don't know if that's true or not, okay, I didn't think so. But my source told me that. So in 1989, the sidewalk was put in, it has one crack in it. It's a big one crack, and believe me, because I've been out there shoveling myself in the winter, that sidewalks get a lot of salt, a lot of salt. One crack. So.
Well, but you're talking aesthetics though, that is ultimately what it comes down to.
I am.
Yeah, because if I said to you,
Now I'm talking aesthetics.
if I said to you, look, I'll give you $1 million of savings if you use asphalt versus concrete. And that really is the ultimate question. Some people in town want us to do the prudent thing and save money. Some people in town, and aesthetics are not as important to them.
Correct.
Some people in town want us to do concrete and are willing to pay for that aesthetic change.
Also correct.
I don't know how to answer that when you're bringing this to the town. I don't know if we should be the ones deciding the aesthetic component of it, but we certainly should be considerable in consideration of saving to get this project done properly. Which goes back to my original argument is, let's do what's necessary, where's necessary, and then move it forward over time. So, while we still have a motion on the table, you know, I'm more excited about having it phase 1 and phase 2, and phase 2 becomes when we do it, when we get that TAP money.
Yeah, I would like to.
And not do it if we don't get the TAP money, and figure out another way to do it.
I would be in favor of that. Telling people that we have a good shot, nothing positive, but a good shot, and an additional grant, which could be a substantial amount of money, don't know how much, won't know till the spring.
Yep.
But we're bringing to you a proposal to do, put out to bid a project.
So that's an interesting concept. So we would, under that scenario, essentially go forward to the town with phase 1, and let's call it about half the project, so about like a less than $2 million project.
Mm-hmm.
Phase 2 is essentially eliminated. Phase 2, as it's defined here, is eliminated. If we get TAP funds, we go forward with it. If we don't, then we find, we try to fund it on our own through the Board of Finance or some other means. Maybe there's 4 grants that Bruce finds, Bruce or whoever sits there in a couple of months.
And
I'd be agreeable to that.
And what I would say is, phase 1 and phase 2
We're
So,
not talking about this phase two on the back, right?
I've not looked at that as,
Okay,
I'm looking at,
okay,
this was what they proposed as one big proposal.
yeah.
Okay, what I'm suggesting is, and the board, the committee could go right back and rearrange phase one and two, because they might think that rather than doing Elizabeth Streets and doing, Maple Streets, they may consider doing this whole strip and committing to this commercial component as one
Route
phase.
7 only?
Doing Route 7 only. And then the wings on 341 are a priority that this next board takes as a means of how we do it. And that hopefully would be a phase two, hopefully with TARP money or other money that we can find.
Well, the TAP money, don't forget,
Sorry,
is
TAP
for
money.
new construction only.
That's true.
Well, but while that's accurate, what they're proposing in this phase one has new construction in it, does it not?
In phase one?
In phase one, as I read it, from
Yes.
the monument to the fife and drum, there is presently no sidewalk beyond the railroad tracks to the fife and drum.
That's correct.
So that is new construction.
That's correct.
So while Barbara brings up the point that yes, TAP funding does, maybe we have to use TAP funding for creating new sidewalks over towards, to the east on 341, and maybe we have to do some other phase system, whether it's capital plan, getting funding, or maybe even some bonding at some point for that phase two.
Yeah, I
And,
think there's a lot of logic in what you said, but I think that would imply that we go back to the Streetscape Committee too and have them redefine the phases to peel off new construction and what they would consider to be optimum if we were only gonna undertake part of it now. So I think,
Well,
from a timing standpoint, I'm not sure that's.
I would argue that they just rearranged these. I think if the town is committed to doing this, that they ought to do it and do it all. And like Rick said, the savings from the railroad tracks to the beginning of this, you might as well do it. It grates me to rip up stuff that's good, but you might as well do it. And that's what you bring to people to say, we're committed to making this town look good, feel good, be good, and be safe. And I think we should all state, whether it's for the next board to deal with, that we're committed to taking the wings, if you will, east the 341, to the next level.
What do you mean to the next level?
To sidewalks in a phase two kind of scenario. I'm suggesting if these guys go back and say Route 7, in my mind, Route 7 is the most important right now. From the greenhouse to wherever they,
Well, here's a question. I don't think these are the recommendations of Streetscape Committee 2, following the work of Streetscape Committee 1, their recommendations to us. I don't think we need to go back to them.
Okay.
If we accept how they've
I got
defined
you.
projects, then we can just define our own phase 1.
okay, fair enough.
I mean, there's logic going to say, so if we wanted to say the Route 7 portion is phase 1, we're going to submit that to the town now and leave the rest for the future, TAP or otherwise. Could break it up that way.
This piece, I sat here at a meeting with the engineer from the room, Mike Doherty, who has done this work and did that. And he, under some pressure from people that didn't believe him, he stuck to his guns, and please correct me, Rick, if I'm incorrect what I'm about to say, and said that he is still of the belief that we could do this whole project, and by the whole project, I mean all of this, phases 1 and 2, nothing in the back, with the numbers that they provided. There was strong disagreement with him within the committee. And when it goes out to bid, he may be proved badly wrong, or he may be proven to be absolutely correct, or even said, I believe that you can do this whole project in concrete and granite, because he's never talked about asphalt, except when asked about his opinion on materials. But his proposal is concrete and granite, that you can do this whole project for these existing numbers. And I remain firmly of the belief that that's what should be done, and that's the only, that's the only yes vote that I would cast, is on doing this whole project with those materials.
But you're committed to doing the whole project?
If we can do it within the existing funding, yes.
So if we can't, what happens?
If we can't,
Who makes cuts?
who makes cuts? That's what a board of selectmen is for.
Well, no, because the project will have been approved.
No,
You're approving the so-called project to go out to bid. If you don't have enough, then you could cut, whether you build a new sidewalk from Swift Lane to the firehouse or something like that, or
that
you, I mean,
that
the
happens.
time
all
of
the
this
time.
is gonna take to go out to get engineered and go out to bid, you're gonna have, to assume by then you're gonna have an answer on the TAP funding. Whether you're gonna get any or all.
I was on the building committee for Kent Center School as a selectman, and I was on the building committee for the firehouse. And in both cases, all kinds of things were cut from that approved project because,
Yeah, like the furniture. I remember that episode. But so basically your view is, from the original streetscape people, it's all or nothing, and you're still into that except the lighting is removed.
I was in favor of what the original streetscape committee proposed. And they know that.
Right, but it's clear that, I mean, they took out the lighting and they have truncated a certain portion of the sidewalk, so it's clear that the bidding that we did then wasn't even gonna match what we have.
We've never done any bidding, it was all engineers.
Right, engineer
No
estimates.
bidding was done.
Right, but I'm sensitive to spending more or as much as we've allocated to do so. And I think we can do it in, I've said this in the beginning and I say it again, I think we can still do it in phases and achieve what we want to achieve over long term.
Maybe.
That's my goal, that's my thought.
I'm not saying we can't.
And how we do it, it makes logical sense to me. If you're talking about continuity and talking about business development, it makes sense from South Commons to, you know, to the frontier. And make it nice, and make it, you know, I'm not gonna be the one that determines whether asphalt or concrete is more aesthetically pleasing. I believe asphalt is a safer, and I don't have the aesthetic concern that most people have, but I'm just one of, you know, 30,000 people in town. But I do think, I just think that we could do this in phases, and
I'm not saying we can't. I'm just saying that I respect the opinion of the engineering company, that we can do it with the amount of funds that we have.
Right, but keep in mind what we're doing, we're borrowing this money.
Correct.
Okay. If indeed we did, just making up, we just did Route 7, and we spent less than what we've actually going to borrow, we can work diligently to then find a less expensive way without borrowing against ourselves for these additional components, which quite honestly, while you can make an argument if you live down here, or you live at the firehouse, or you live over at Kent School, that it would be nice to have an improved sidewalk, as long as they're serviceable, we could say to them, we're committed to having that done for you at a later time. And that saves us money, which I believe is part of the role of what we have to determine.
No question.
And I just don't, you know, if the bids had come in at $6 million or $5 million and we went out and asked the people to do it, the likelihood we would have said had the same results. The town would have said, sure, for $5 million. Doesn't mean to say we spend it. And I don't.
I'm not an advocate, as I think both of you have stated various times, of spending the money just because we have the money. That's not at all what I'm, just to make that clear.
Mhm.
We've collectively saved this town lots of money over.
Right,
the
but
years with
let's
various
follow that
projects
logic.
and things.
That you're not advocating spending the money just because we have the money. But we've been granted permission to spend that money.
We have been.
So now you're ready to spend all of that money on one plan at one time.
I would prefer to do that.
And my preference would be to not spend that much money, or as much money, and to get the biggest bang we can on one section, and then go and find other ways to reduce that.
All right,
That's my mindset.
I'm not necessarily opposed to what you just said. My biggest opposition to that is I don't agree with your section choice.
Peckham, what section do you want?
I would sort of shrink this is
Yeah.
a T here.
Yeah, I got you.
I'd shrink the T.
Okay,
I'd go concrete and granite from the Kent Green entrances and exits all the way down to the monument. And I'd turn the corner and go 341 to the last driveway to the village barns. And I'd turn the corner and go this way towards the bridge, stopping somewhere in here
before Elizabeth Street.
before Elizabeth Street. And I would go south on 7, I would probably go past the gas station or maybe to the art association. So just,
And what would your rationale be for doing it just like that? From a
But then-
design and
but
a
then-
town point of view?
and granted, there wouldn't be the continuity that has been.
No, I got it.
discussed In some
In
detail.
some cases, it wouldn't be any sidewalk at all. Like past artifacts and,
Which there's hardly any
There's
of
nothing
now.
anywhere
I
there.
don't think, personally, I don't think that it's necessary.
and
I
why
walked that
not?
sidewalk the other day, past where Wasabi used to be.
Yeah,
And it's about
yeah.
this wide, there's something there.
Bent and broken,
There's some
Yeah.
sidewalk there, I don't think it's necessary.
but why not?
I don't think it's necessary, I don't think it needs, I don't think there needs to be a sidewalk,
But why not?
because I don't think people walk to the Kent Greenhouse.
And I don't believe people walk past pretty much past the train tracks.
But there, they don't, and they don't for the reason I gave earlier in this meeting. They're not going to, if the sidewalks are made to the greenhouse, because the Kent Greenhouse is a wonderful business, and I do business with them, but you drive to a greenhouse and load up your truck with plants and so forth.
I would say just the opposite. I think we need to determine what town is and what our business zone is. And I see this, honestly, I see this development of the downtown is really what it was. Streetscape was about the downtown.
It was.
Because we don't have Lane Street and we don't have Elizabeth Street, right? In fact, every time I brought it up, or someone brought it up, it's like, why are you bringing that up? That wasn't our purview. Okay, so really, let's focus on what it was about and what it is about. It's about improving the downtown. So the question is, what is downtown? In my opinion, downtown should be driven by planning and zoning, which is from the Kent Greenhouse, all the way up to basically the Fife and Drum.
So you're saying that because that's what zoned commercial?
Hmm.
Oh, okay.
That's what it is.
That's certainly, yes.
What we're hearing, really, is that all three of you each have your own distinct opinion. So, why do you spend all this time trying to convince one another? Bring your 3 separate proposals to the town as questions and let them get voted on by the taxpayers, and let the taxpayers decide. You can each what's wrong with bringing 3 separate proposals to them? And whichever one gets the most votes is what happens, and then the taxpayers have had their say.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, but what's going to, in that particular scenario, what's going to prevent option 4, which is, well, I like this from Bruce's,
Because you're
but
only
I
bringing
like
3,
Jeff's, and
because you're gonna bring 3.
it's
It'll be a
take it
town
or leave it,
meeting.
it's A, B, or C. is
That's
what you're
right.
saying.
But
We have
Barbara,
3
your
proposals.
point is well taken, and this is what we call negotiations, and we're trying to figure out
But
whether,
you're just spending all this time trying to convince one another
and that's
to
what,
get on board with each other.
and that's a goal.
And that's what happened with
But
the
why can't the
streetscape.
taxpayers weigh in? Why can't they each decide if they like your proposal or they like Jeff's?
I would argue what Bruce is arguing is that each taxpayer is gonna have a different faction and group.
You're gonna be able to get a consensus. You'll get a town
It's-
meeting
it's
with a
good input.
consensus.
Yeah,
That's good input, but,
I don't disagree.
I mean, Jeff wants all asphalt, 1 proposal. You wanna do it in phases, another proposal. You wanna do the whole thing, 3rd proposal. Why can't you just bring that to the taxpayers like that?
If they've already already voted to spend up to a certain amount of money, why aren't you willing to do that?
You don't have to convince one another. Because
So-
you all have very good arguments in and of your own belief
So
system.
you're saying we could make a motion with all
Each,
three
yes,
of these?
each
That
one
could be
of
the
you,
motion
yeah.
coming out of this meeting?
That's right. Why not?
Better do a machine or paper vote then, because if you do it by hand, you're never gonna.
Yeah,
I
so
figured it.
do a paper vote, just plan on it. Why not?
I mean, I always assume it would go to referendum. Somebody's gonna vote to send it to referendum, if that's a good choice. There are three
Okay.
questions.
That would be, yeah, you'd have a paragraph. in each
Okay.
one. Or just-
So-
So Barbara's solution is certainly one, if we can't hammer something out right now. And that's really the key.
I mean, if you can't convince one another,
Well, it's, let's get to a consensus. Can we get to a consensus? Are you gonna sit there and say, nope, that's all in one?
but why do you need to? Why can't the taxpayers have a say?
They can have a say. They've been at, we've had these meetings. It's been out there. I mean, the taxpayers have been saying things. You're hearing three different representations of the taxpayers, probably.
Right, but it appears that you three are trying to make that decision for them. By bringing them one proposal, they don't have any option. It's either yes or no.
Well, that's true, but that's part of why the board's elected by the people is to make some decisions. We're grappling with this right now. I suppose we could put three options out, it
You
just
could go
seems.
to a meeting and say exactly what you just said, that we grappled with this for a long time and many, many meetings over the course of the past few years, and we are of three different mindsets, and so we'd like to present to you.
So to
Kick
play
that.
devil's advocate for just a second, you bring one proposal to the taxpayers, just proposal, and it gets voted down because they don't want it. Then what do you do?
Well, and to piggyback on that, all along at the town hearings, the selectmen have said that they will bring back choices to the
That's right.
townspeople to decide.
That's true.
You did not say you will bring one proposal that you agreed on collectively.
That's true.
So if you bring one,
Sure.
All right, but here's another question we probably need to address. Are we gonna acknowledge that we're gonna eliminate TAP from this discussion?
I would like to.
I would say yes, it's an unknown, total unknown.
Okay, so forget about TAP.
I mean,
I mean, if we're gonna,
let's say we go with some form of what Barbara just suggested. Are we gonna mention that at all, or not even bring it into the equation?
it so confuses the
Okay,
issue because it's an
okay.
unknown.
Fine.
I mean, I was also happy with, I know there's a motion on the floor, but I was happy with the concept of doing phase one as listed here, eliminating phase two for now, in the belief that we'll get some TAP funding that would apply to that, and if it wasn't enough to do it, then, you know, we'd have to do some creative financing, which I think we could arrange, so I would be agreeable with that. But if we're not gonna take that, this is a black or white, either we're gonna say, we're gonna hold out for TAP and eliminate some, and wait for TAP,
I don't want TAP to even be a part of the
then
discussion.
let's eliminate it from our vocabulary during this meeting.
That's fine.
So if we go to the town with three proposals,
And I was gonna say, I started to agree with what you were just saying, minus the TAP stuff. But I'm not voting to take phase one and hold off phase two until later, if phase one is in asphalt.
Okay, see, we're negotiating here.
I'm
So he doesn't want asphalt, you got it?
I want no part of asphalt, and
Okay.
I'm not gonna go into a big diatribe, because we've heard it before.
Right.
Where have you ever seen asphalt sidewalks, real sidewalks, in a downtown, anywhere? Outside, on the outskirts, or the outlying areas, yes, no question. They just don't exist. Why won't the state, certain aspects of the state fund them? Why don't the state ever do asphalt sidewalks? Why do no towns anywhere in Connecticut that anybody can find do asphalt sidewalks? As John Casey posed mainly to Mike, but to the committee in general, do you know something that we don't know? Mike made his stand very clear.
John Casey's sidewalks are asphalt.
They are, and they're private property.
Okay, but, I mean, if concrete was the
And they're
holy
in
grail.
terrible shape.
If
As
Con-
John will agree.
So, there is an aesthetic component that is important, and I get it. As I said, for asphalt, I feel it's a safer, and it doesn't bother me aesthetically, but for those, I can concede those who want that look. I think we should consider keeping phase one and committing to, and again, we can turn it around, we can ask them to turn it around, we can employ what you were just saying, however you think it works, but I think that's the direction we should go. All the while committed to making sure we are going to grow and go towards continuity. And to me, the simplest and easiest way, and take it as my argument or persuasion or whatever you want me to do, to me, it's to tie this. These are primarily, both the wings, east and west, Elizabeth Street and Maple Street, are not commercial. They're somewhat commercial in pieces of it.
I think there's some people that would disagree with you.
Name them. The firehouse?
No, you want me to name some, I probably will leave them out, but starting from the monument and heading, there's all the village barns to their driveway. Then there's the Kent Country Inn, for sale it may be, but it's the Kent Country Inn. There's B Real Estate down the way.
Okay.
There's, and then the rest of it is residential. And then there's Stewart Farms, which is a Target farther out. On the other side, there will likely someday, well, no, never mind. There's the town garage and the firehouse, and the big one is Templeton Farms. Not commercial, but something that needs sidewalks. And then there's Patco, Kent Mobile. And then going the other way through the intersection, there's going to be a new liquor store, which is certainly commercial. There's a gun shop, there's a veterinarian, there's Frontier, which is just some station or whatever. On the other side, there's a cemetery, a nursery school, and a church. So do I think, I'm trying to read your mind, trying to do it for 2 years, but, do I think that what I just listed is as commercial as Route 7? No. In terms of quantity, no, not at all.
And again, I'm not trying to ignore them. I own property on Maple Street going that way. It's not my point. My point is that if you said to me as a taxpayer, hey Chris, we're doing Main Street, and in 3 years, we're looking to get you done too. I'd sit there and go, okay, that makes sense to me. I mean, as long as I know that A, it's coming, and B, if, not so much me, but if you're talking about going down Elizabeth Street, or even going to the Village Barns, it's perfectly serviceable sidewalks. Not for 10 years, but maybe for 3 years. And that's where I see doing another section and promising them and putting it in paper, and putting it, write it down, whatever. But to me, the priority is the center of town, and the center of town then expands, if you're gonna do the whole thing, if you're gonna make sense, do north and south. All right.
I don't completely disagree with what you just said, but I still believe what I would propose, what I would go in front of the townspeople with, if we use Barbara's suggestion, would be.
Please do, please do.
Is doing this whole project in concrete and granite, and if it comes in lower, then we're gonna be coming back and with some reductions, and those reductions will either be, will hopefully not be not doing it at all, they will be going to concrete and asphalt.
There's a lot of merit to all your arguments.
I know there is.
really think that the taxpayers should be allowed to line up behind whatever argument they're comfortable with. And like Joyce said, that's what you told them you'd do. You'd bring them choices. So do it. You got 3 clear choices, I think. between the three of you.
Well, the choices that they put here, that they propose are either asphalt or concrete.
But that's not your
It's
choices.
the whole point. No, that's true, I'm just saying that that's been the recommendation, so there are choices here already.
Well, you could
And
make
there
that
are-
the very first choice to the taxpayers. Give them four choices. Start with concrete or asphalt and scope of project.
Mhm.
You know, I'm liking what you're saying more and more the longer I think about it, but I would not want to do it in a public town meeting.
Do it in a
And-
referendum.
Well, that's what I was leading up to. I'd want to do it in a referendum with a well-designed ballot, because I would not want to go before the townspeople again and argue
You have that
for-
option.
for
You can do it,
options.
for sure, for
No,
sure.
I'm just saying.
I think the
But
taxpayers would be
that's,
very
what Barbara
pleased
said,
with that.
yeah, you're warming us up to this concept. It could actually be, phase one is granite and concrete or granite and asphalt, and then, section two, scope of project. Route 7, or the entire project.
There you go.
Yeah, but that skews my argument, because what it says, it just doesn't tell anybody that we're planning to do, that there's an actual plan.
There will be once they're done voting.
No, what I'm
Sure
saying
there
is,
will.
well, my argument doesn't carry, because think about it. If you put on a ballot that you're only doing Route 7, people are gonna say, what, are you crazy?
No, he just said phase one and two.
Well, I think that option could be Route 7 now, and the
Okay.
second part of it to be done within a 3-year period.
Three-year
And then
period.
and then it's actually,
That's accurate.
and then it actually does bind the future Board of Selectmen to
Mhm.
something, because the referendum will show that
I
You
think
propose
that's
Because
fair.
the people
That's
voted
clear.
for that.
people
I think
voted
it's
on it.
fair.
Not
The
just the
taxpayers win.
three people sitting
Yeah,
around.
for us to
saying
agree, if
something.
the next board comes in, it's for you guys.
See ya.
Right.
So that's potentially workable.
Seems fair to the taxpayer.
It does.
They've been waiting.
Rick, any further thoughts on that or anything else?
I'm just having difficulty if I'm thinking, if the people have already approved the money, all you have to do is ask them, here's the project, you wanna spend up to that amount of money on it.
Or less, that or less, yeah.
That, or, well, you're not gonna go beyond it, and that's, but if the, I give them the options of materials if you want, but I think it should all be done at once if the money's there.
Can I understand something, if you don't
But
understand?
that's Bruce's take, so that'll be one of the options in front of the taxpayers.
Well, if Bruce is strictly concrete, he's saying, but I'm saying that if they want asphalt, fine, but it should all be done at once.
Right,
Start
but
breaking
that's
up.
still his take,
I mean,
so.
the phasing deal, they went crazy on that, because first we started talking about, we don't wanna rip up the whole town at once. Well, no, you're gonna rip up the section of Main Street before Memorial Day, get
Right.
that done. Memorial Day to Columbus Day or whatever, you're not gonna work on that, work on the other sections then. Then people start talking about doing the phases, well, you can phase the construction, but you don't gotta phase the whole project.
Right.
Help me here. Let's just say we decide to do the whole thing, and everybody says, yes, let's spend all the money. What is the time, walk us through day one, if you will, or the first 6 months and where it gets fixed.
Well, it would depend on the timing to start it.
Yeah,
If you started it between, I would say between the holidays,
okay,
the summer section.
yeah,
If you're gonna start in the middle of that, then you would start on the wings or
right,
maybe 7 South, except, I mean, it's gonna be busy around the gas station no matter when. But then the actual, like where all the restaurants are and all that stuff is where it's really busy in the summertime. Do that outside the holiday period, but you still have a good part of October and November when you can be doing that, or April through May.
and how long would the whole project take?
It could be done within this construction season.
So you could do everything within the construction season. I guess where I'm going is if we're allocated this kind of money, and we did it over a 2-year period of time, in phases, but we have the money, but we did it in phases, would it give us any advantage to then apply for any other grants while we're doing that to offset?
We
No,
can,
No?
no, because usually you can't apply for a grant for something that's already in progress, like that.
No, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if, so take for example, we
They
just,
don't let you supplant funds, they don't let you do that, usually.
they wouldn't let you, we would not be able to apply for something if we didn't do, let's say, east and west, Maple Street and Elizabeth Street.
if
Until,
you already
until.
voted to fund that project, Barbara's saying that, then applying for another grant.
I see, so that's, they will not supplement that.
I think that if you spread it out, split it up in years, it's gonna cost you, because there's going to be more mobilization charges and all that stuff. And
Right.
if the contractor can come in and say, all right, I have 5,000 feet of curbing to put in, place that order, boom, he's gonna get one price. And all the material, he's gonna order all that ahead of time. So he's locked in with his pricing. If you start going from season to season, I think you're gonna get, the contractor's not gonna, more than likely, he's gonna do add-ons for moving stuff in and out, equipment stuff.
Right, but your premise is based on saving, your, is the savings that we have to expend ourselves because we bonded it. My premise is, by spreading it out over time, is based on going out and getting other money, additional funds. And how realistic is that? That's what I've been working on.
It's a big unknown.
Of course it's a big unknown, but it seems to me that in the 30 years I've been related to this town, there's always some funding that seems to come to this town. Not guaranteed, ever.
No.
Not guaranteed ever.
And
But just, and so that's where it's sort of the basis of my argument, or my position is where I feel confident.
Okay,
You can
so-
shake me off it if you
So
want.
bring that proposal as one of them to the taxpayers and let them decide how they wanna see it happen. I don't see why that's so erroneous, just do it. They're very different, all three proposals are very different. And make the first choice whether they want asphalt.
The first choice is simply a matter of materials, and
Yeah,
there's disagreement amongst the selectmen as to the preferred material.
Well, that's an aesthetic home, which is great. It takes care of the aesthetics.
yeah.
Yes, that's completely aesthetic, I mean, financial impact,
Yeah,
but the decision is aesthetic. Is the aesthetics worth the money,
Correct.
even if you agree with the aesthetics, but
Right.
that's another issue. Okay, then part B is scope of project.
Mhm.
Scope one is, and at this point, we eliminate this
Yeah,
phase one.
get rid of
Phase
it
two,
all.
we got North Main Street, Bridge Street, South Main, and Maple Street.
Mhm.
Four
Distinct.
components of the project. So, option one is undertake, in however schedule works out for Rick and the magical engineers and construction people, do the entire thing on an appropriate schedule. Second option would be to do Main Street, top to bottom, with the proviso
do that.
that the wings would be committed to be undertaken within a, say, 3 to 5 year period
Mhm.
to decide how to work that. And is there a third option there? I mean, that's pretty much the essence, define
That's
it
the
how you
essence.
want, but that's the essence of what you were saying.
Mhm. And the only thing that's, again, not clear in that second option that I'm proposing is that there is a savings, potential savings, maybe it isn't, because you could find yourself committed to do the two wings in year 3, and there'd be no public funding. Correct? But, that said, we wouldn't have had to use the whole bond.
So we could
So,
rebond, and we may end up in an equal position, possibly, I mean, who knows? So I think, so we got
And I'm
4
sorry.
permutations there, and I think that's a reasonable presentation of our grappling.
I do too. Bring it to the taxpayers.
Okay, first of all, can you call on the original vote
Yeah,
if
we
you're
have-
going
we
in a
have-
total different direction now? So,
but we still have a motion on the floor.
you do, that's what I'm saying, you
Which
need to.
was,
Jeff's.
Just granite and
Oh.
asphalt.
I
Granite
just
and
called
asphalt.
and it was seconded.
Mm.
Yeah.
All in favor with the motion that has been on the table for a short while now? Signify by saying aye.
I'll still take my motion.
Opposed? Motion defeated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So then we have a proposal. Could you put that in the form of a motion?
Propose we have a town referendum posing two questions to the town. Question one is choice of materials for this streetscape renovation, granite curbs and concrete sidewalks or granite curbs and asphalt sidewalks. Question two, or B, I forget what I started with.
Two.
Scope of project. Option one is the entire scope as defined without the phase reference. North Main Street, Bridge Street, South Main Street, and Maple Street as depicted. Option B is to just do North Main Street and South Main Street with the proviso that will be committed to undertake the other two, Bridge Street and Maple Street, within a 3 to 5 year time frame.
Okay. I'll second that motion. I'll ask the audience, did you find any issues particularly with the second, the scope of project?
Nope, call the vote.
Well,
Well,
I think the original plan went to the community house crosswalk, whether you go to there or stop at the north entrance to the Green Gears. The only difference between the two plans.
That's the kind of thing that I was wondering if we should get specific.
You're gonna redo everything, you're gonna redo that piece too.
Yeah. if you want.
I would agree with Rick, if we're gonna do the scope, just do the scope,
Okay, all right,
you know,
that's fine.
but again,
I don't understand that.
well,
Well, part one there, North Main, just says from the monument to the Kent Green on the east side, you would say up to the crosswalk at the Congregational Church, wherever the original
no,
plan.
well, one may say that. One may say that if you're gonna do that. Because in effect, you're going back to the original plan,
For the boundary part, yeah,
yeah.
for that piece. There's a few other things that are different than.
But aren't we setting that up for failure, because we already know that that's already, the committee two cut this back because they were concerned with the actual pricing, were they not? And they cut out $240,000 of lighting.
Yeah.
So we're not going back to what was recommended initially, we're going with this. Is that accurate?
The Streetscape Committee too did spend a lot of time defining these sections, and I would, without having them come back and kind of redo it, reanalyze some details, I say we stick with their recommendations.
Okay, so the second part then of your motion was talking about scopes. Can you
The
restate?
scope will involve North Main Street, South Main Street, as recommended by Streetscape Committee 2, with the proviso that the Bridge Street and the Maple Street references are committed on a 3 to 5 year time frame.
Okay, so just looking at the paper that we were given by the committee, right?
Right.
So you're saying the North Main Street part here and the South Main Street part here
Correct.
as one.
That's the committed section, a part of this,
Okay.
in terms of scope of work. North Main Street, South Main Street is scope of work that's being committed, the others are being committed to future work.
So you, rather say committed in year one and then year 3 to 5.
Just-
Okay.
So does, before we vote on it, do you have it all?
Yes, sir.
You do?
So the motion is to send this to town referendum. Do we need to define timing?
had scope of work, that was number 2 in your, and you had 2 things underneath it.
Yeah, one is the whole project.
One is the whole project, right?
Correct.
The whole project.
And the other is doing North and South Main Street as one phase with the agreement that Bridge Street and Maple Street would be done within the next 3 to 5 years. But I didn't hear the whole project option in what you were saying. So that's in there, Joyce?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I'll second that
Already
revised
passed.
motion. Right?
It has been.
It was revised. No?
No, it was clarified.
Clarify.
Okay, just for, okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
It was unanimous.
Yay, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank
you.
you. Thanks for
Barbara, thank you
patience and input.
for,
Now let me
filter-
throw a
filtering
wrench in
that.
here.
What's that?
Let me throw a wrench in here now. Somebody asks you what's it gonna cost, what you can tell them.
But we're
Up
gonna use
to-
the prices.
Up to,
No
Up
more
to
than
the
what you've
appropriated
already.
funding, right?
I'm sorry?
Say
You're
what?
gonna say up to the appropriated,
well,
Up to, not including the
No.
appropriate.
well, no.
Well, we can use the prices.
I
that-
think we have to segregate the prices under these options. Because
Well, then-
what's the reason for not just doing the whole thing? Why would you choose not to do the whole thing other than economy? Right?
and you need to give the engineers a call and get the pricing from them if you've changed the scope of the project.
So in the referendum, there would be, in the question, you
We
propose?
didn't, none of the questions you had any pricing on them, so.
No.
Well, but all the pricing is here,
Yeah,
based
the
on.
pricing would
committee,
be in the scope section.
Based on the committee.
I don't think it's about pricing.
I don't either.
It's not about pricing,
We-
it's
They've
it's
already
what people
approved the
want,
money.
And we won't know,
right?
All of
People
this
gotta
can be
choose.
done
It's definitely
within the
about price.
scope. According to the engineer, all of this can be done within the bond resolution that's already been approved.
Yeah, but I
Right?
think that's the wrong approach. The point of even discussing any options is, can we find an acceptable, desirable solution that costs less money? So without some indication of the cost impact of choosing asphalt over concrete, then it's a non-decision.
Right, so I had started working on a document for the town meeting, and this one isn't gonna work, but I can still use the same format. And you can say phase 1, and I'll put out what it is and put the dollars next to it, or question 1A, question 1B, or whatever it turns out to be, so that they have that information. This information I was taking from
Right.
the Streetscape Committee 2 pricing, but it didn't really look at.
Yeah, I mean, this has kind of changed the way we've restructured, but that's
Yeah,
perfect.
obviously.
So there'll be
Mhm.
2 check marks here. Well, it's a little different, but they'll.
Well, it's gonna be, question 1 is gonna be asphalt or concrete.
Right.
Question 2 is gonna be A or B. And one of these is gonna be A, and one will be B,
And where will the pricing be?
right here, just like this.
Well, that's what the ballot would look something like.
Well,
Okay.
I'll have a handout like this for the people.
So where would there be, are we gonna have a meeting before this? A town meeting, or are we just gonna announce that there's gonna be a referendum?
You have to,
Whatever the requirement.
Well,
you
that's
have to
right,
have
it
a
has
town
to be a
meeting
meeting to adjourn to
to
referendum.
adjourn to a referendum.
That's true.
Okay, that sounds perfect. Handout that explains what the cost impact of each decision is,
Right.
as simple and easy to understand, but you tend to be pretty good at simplifying things. So if you can look at it and say, here's the lowest cost option, but I'm willing to go a little more, I don't wanna go full blown, but it's there, and then they go in and.
Well, it'll be
make
the
the
cost option that's applicable to the 2 options you're providing them to vote on.
But when you, under the material question, you're gonna have to put both pricing? You have to put the pricing?
I can, that's how I have it
Because
now.
Right, so you're gonna have to have the pricing for the full project under asphalt and the
Well,
full
that's
pricing
gonna-
under
There's gonna be
concrete.
4
Right,
prices.
but
And
that's
then-
gonna help
exactly.
them understand.
Okay, I just wanna make sure you're gonna list it under, when they pick the product, that they have all 4 options. The pricing for all 4.
The first thing they're gonna do is pick what the product
Right, so
is
they
gonna
need-
be.
they-
So they'll be able to use the dollar information to say, well, I'm sort of in favor of doing the whole thing. but I want concrete, or I want
Right, okay.
asphalt.
So you'll have all four
But
options.
there's gonna be 4 prices listed,
That's,
right?
Yes,
yeah,
Okay.
But the other thing I would like clarified is the commitment to the 3 to 5 years, that there are alternatives other than just bonding it.
well, you can talk to
I
that.
think we
We're gonna have to, I
You
think.
can talk to that.
I think we need to, I think we need to.
Just say that we.
Because as an example, there's already this tap. Now, great, I understand it's only
Yeah,
for new ones,
but there'll be some
but
other,
there's gotta be
something
something.
else.
But you know, there's a whole nother issue here that we're not even discussing yet, but when this actually comes before the Board of Finance, once we have an approved project, taxpayers have approved, it's the Board of Finance's job to decide how the funding is gonna be structured.
Mhm.
One of the funding mechanisms that's on the table is to go the USDA grant loan. So there may be more grant money involved, automatically, we don't know yet, we aren't
Sometimes the
there
USDA comes
yet.
through with more grants than
So-
you expect.
I mean, ultimately, it's an unsolvable problem if there's so many variables coming in after the fact. We've dealt with this for years.
So that's just something you can speak to at the town meeting, say,
Yeah, I
this is
think
what the
so.
project
Maybe
would
next time.
cost.
And I think
If we
you
don't
and
get
each of
any
us, if
additional
we want,
grants.
can put out a position statement,
Sure.
advocating for a position or explaining the rationale for
Mhm.
different positions. But that's explanation.
Okay.
But committing to do it in 3 to 5 years, I think that stands on its own. And if that's what the
Okay.
people vote for, I think it binds the future board.
So will we have a town meeting, or hearing, I guess it would be, no meeting, because a meeting has to adjourn to a referendum,
Mhm.
at which each of us will make a presentation, or will we just have a handout with our 3, here's what each of us propose?
Probably each making a presentation will be, I don't think we need to be compelled to make a presentation.
Short,
Yeah.
and with no discussion.
Well, whatever.
I don't know, I just think
Yeah.
discussion could be endless.
Mhm. That's true.
Yeah,
It could
it
be
could-
endless.
It really could be.
Okay. I don't
Almost
know.
as long as
Ours
this
have
meeting.
been endless.
Barbara's trying to. So I'm gonna throw another wrench in it, is, this is streetscape, correct?
That's what we-
What about Elizabeth Street and Lane Street and all the other streets that we've missed and people have weighed in before last time? It is my opinion that it is our obligation to fix all the sidewalks, and I would like to take it off that total streetscape component. That said, maybe it's in the narrative, when we talk to people, is we are then gonna be committed to undertaking the rest of the project. But I think it's important for this municipality to say to its constituents that we are going to undertake all the sidewalks. I know both committees have kicked those down the road because they don't want to deal with them for one reason or another.
Well,
But we heard clearly from the Elizabeth Street or the elementary school that,
I heard from you at a town meeting. You brought up Elizabeth Street at the last minute.
no, that's not true. Matt Starr actually brought it up, and I agreed with him.
Lane Street has been included in the TAP grant application, so.
Right.
Correct.
Just
Okay, so
because
that could be
it's a
under,
new sidewalk.
I got it.
That was an unnecessary wrinkle, Chris.
Well, it is, but,
I mean,
it is, but there's the people on
well,
sidewalks.
there's a lot of issues in town that we have to continue to address, and that's one of them. And even though it involves the term sidewalk, we're dealing with a rather well-defined project. And I think we made a lot of progress, we have something to bring to the town. And there'll be
Okay.
more to bring to the town,
All right.
including
And off the record, are we off the record?
No, we're on record.
Okay. Well, that's not, you know better than I, because you lived for years on Elizabeth Street. Are those sidewalks really in need of replacement?
As
Seriously.
as much as.
The ones from Bridge Street to your house.
As much as the ones from the railroad tracks north. As much as the ones from the monument to Elizabeth Street. So are they in that, if you want me to rank them again,
They're inserviceable?
they're inserviceable, which goes back to my original argument. So, and that's the beef you're gonna get, when somebody on Elizabeth Street says, well, what the heck are you doing that for, and not doing my street? And we have little kids that walk on it, not tourists.
I move we adjourn, achieved our objective.
do you have any idea when we're gonna have a town meeting?
I think we should look into, what the requirements are for a referendum and plan a town meeting accordingly.
Okay.
Jeff, do you know your schedule at this point? No.
No, talking about a week, 2 weeks, a month from now?
Well, Joyce needs a week to warn it,
Yeah.
that's about it. You could set it today, you could set it for next
Ah,
Friday.
actually, we might be able to come up with
I'm
something.
not,
Well, the Friday after, you only need a week to warn it.
I do.
Yeah, but how long does it take to
But I-
get the machines ready?
Right, I mean, we
Well,
need to,
but you have to do the referendum is a week after the town, has to be within a week after the town meeting.
but there's no point in setting the town meeting date, because Darlene may say if you want absentee ballots and that sort of thing, that I don't know the timing on. So maybe we should wait on that.
We can set a town meeting date right now.
Well, because the referendum has to
It has to
happen
be within a window, and I don't wanna
After the town
mess up
meeting.
that window if we
I
set a
think
town
it's-
meeting.
14 days, but I'm not positive.
I don't recall, and I don't wanna speak for.
We'll be able to find out the answer to all of that early next week.
Monday.
For sure.
So
As soon as I
Jeff,
talk
are
to
you
Darlene.
available, are you both available for a short selectmen's meeting?
On what day?
I can do just about any day next week. depending
Columbus
on
Day is the
time.
14th. That's,
That's the
next
following.
week is the 7th.
Next week's the 7th. I could do that. I could do Tuesday.
Next week, I'm pretty available. Do the 8th. 9th would have to be early, the 10th and 11th at this point would probably be okay. I will say, if it's a week, I'm pretty darn sure I'll be here on the 18th. And after that, the rest of the month is muddy. So if it's
Well,
a
you-
2-week requirement, then we can't make
You
it.
need to be here for the meeting. You don't need to be here for the referendum because there'll be absentee ballots.
Well,
And
if
we'll
it's
speak
some-
for you.
I
said we'll speak for her.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
You can't do it all
I
at the
was
same
wrong.
time.
No.
Yeah, but he's
I
quick
was
to
talking-
pounce on that
I
opportunity.
was talking about the meeting, which we'll discuss this with no.
Well, I
Okay.
need to check with them, and I'll just set on there.
Yeah.
Did we decide a day?
For the.
You said the 8th,
For
Jeff?
our meeting?
For our meeting.
Just to set the date.
Just-
Set the
set-
dates
set
after
the
we've
date.
gotten the information. from
I would say
town
Tuesday is
clerk.
probably a smarter day to do it.
Tuesday, the 8th?
Yeah.
Okay, but have a noon to 1 meeting in White Plains. It's a short meeting, but we can do it before or after. So like 9 o'clock in the morning.
I have an appointment at 9 o'clock,
Let's do it in the afternoon then.
but when are you gonna be back from White
Okay.
Plains?
5 o'clock.
No,
Okay.
we could say 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock?
Okay, sewer,
At 4:30.
at 4:30.
That's okay, we have sewer meeting at 4:30.
So that works for you, you're gonna be here anyway.
At 3, yeah.
right? So 3 o'clock.
Take an hour to date.
I don't know.
Well,
3 o'clock on the 8th?
Yes.
Okay.
And this should be a short meeting, right?
Should be very short.
Very short.
well, with your
Well-
schedules, everybody bring your calendar.
Yeah. But in the meantime, be looking at, like you said, Jeff, you're gone as of what, the 18th?
It gets muddy. The 18th, I almost definitely here. I hate to use that word, the definite word, but the 18th, it looks pretty certain.
Beyond there.
The next week, I'm out the whole
All right,
week.
so our goal should be on Tuesday to set a town meeting date before the 18th, because you want to be there and should be there. And it appears as though the referendum will be while you're away, but that doesn't really matter.
Well, no, doesn't the town meeting roll right into the referendum?
No, it just adjourns to a future referendum.
Oh,
It can though, can-
That's a lot of coordination.
yeah, but it can, it's been done before.
Well, you gotta get all your
Yep.
absentee ballots and all that stuff ahead of time.
Can be,
You don't have to-
but it doesn't necessarily,
Yeah.
doesn't mean it should be.
Yeah.
No, so it could adjourn to when you're away.
Do another adjourn to a referendum too, if people at the town meeting decide not to do anything, right? So that's, you don't wanna print the ballots until
Yeah.
they agree to go to referendum.
Okay.
so for now, the 8th at 3 o'clock.
Correct.
Got it.
Now can we move to
Motion
adjourn?
adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.